Hello, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. Today, we have three outstanding panelists. First, Tom Heinen. He stands out as a true Cleveland entrepreneur. His grocery stores provide jobs for thousands of Cleveland residents and food for hundreds of thousands of Clevelanders. Small businesses such as his are not the only factor in bringing prosperity to Cleveland. Marianne Crosley, the CEO of the Cleveland Leadership Center, educated numerous individuals and enabled them to be leaders of tomorrow through civic leadership. Our third panelist, Alonzo Mitchell, is the founder of Ohio Homecoming. He strives to solve Cleveland's vacant public property issues through the Village Project and other public policy initiatives. Alonzo has shown his pride for Cleveland in a variety of venues, including the most recent TEDx CLE. Today, we'll learn about the challenges and successes that these three panelists have faced in their efforts to bring about the Renaissance of Cleveland. Once again, I would like to encourage all of you to tweet, Instagram, Snapchat, or Yik Yak about our forum. Now, Nick, I hand the forum off to you and our esteemed panel.
So my name is Nick Rutherford. I'm this year's chair of the City Club of Cleveland Youth Forum Council. I'm also a senior at Walsh Jesuit High School. And Dom briefly explained who you all are, but if you could just expand a little bit on what your role in Cleveland is, where you see yourself professionally and socially within this area.
Great, thanks, Nick. Hi, everybody. How are you today? Good. Okay. Is there anybody in the room besides me who does not know what Yik Yak is? Or am I the only one? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Not feeling quite so old now. So Nick asked us to tell a little bit about our story. I grew up in Cleveland. When I went away to college, I stayed away. Went to college in New York, worked in Washington, D.C., decided to go to law school, took a job in New York City, and I was a homicide prosecutor in New York City for 7 years. I got married. My husband was from Cleveland, and he desperately wanted to come back, so he reluctantly dragged me back with him, and I never looked back. I have loved being here. The role I'm in now as president of the Cleveland Leadership Center is the best job in Cleveland. So for all of you in this room, when you think about what you want to do, you want my job. It is the most amazing job. I get to interact with leaders your age, leaders who are growing in their careers, senior level leaders, and to have the opportunity to make the connections with all of you and inspire change in Cleveland. So happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, I guess that would be my turn. So I'm Tom Heinen again, and I am, for those of you who don't know, am co-CEO, co-president of Heinen's Grocery Stores, which is a third-generation company. We are 86 years old this year, and fourth generation has actually started working in our stores in Chicago, and my oldest daughter, 26 right now, has every intention of coming back to Cleveland to help operate our stores. So professionally, obviously born and bred here in Cleveland, and spent a little bit of time after I graduated from college away from Cleveland, like a year, and came back, joined the family business, and much like Marianne, never looked back, but certainly have seen Cleveland change dramatically in my life here. And socially, I'm not quite sure how to answer that, but I'm a lot of fun. So I guess I hang with Nick's dad, so it makes me
too much fun sometimes.
But I am very involved with the Boys and Girls Club of Cleveland. I think at-risk and underserved youth is a huge focus that all of us need to have. So I'm very committed to that organization, and I guess that's it.
Okay. My name is Alonzo Mitchell III. I was born here in Cleveland, St. Luke's Hospital. I attended Bedford High School, class of 1999. Feels like, what's that, 15, 16 years ago, something like that, right? And then Cleveland State University is where I finished up. And so Cleveland, this place is pretty much who I am. The way that I got to where I am is that different people fed into my seed and then helped me to be a more proficient writer and speaker and a community development person. And I worked in corporate America for 7 years after that. and I got an opportunity to move to Washington, D.C., and it was everything I thought I wanted it to be. I was driving a nicer car, and I was living in a very nice place right outside of the stadium in D.C., and I was going to fancy places that no one I knew had ever eaten at. And then, but 7 years ago, my heart got convicted, and I said that I would come back to Cleveland, I would give 10 years of my life, I would donate it as a volunteer to the city of Cleveland for 10 years during my prime. So it would be from the time I was 27, 28 to 37, where I would just donate and just decide that I would try to find a way to make Cleveland a better place. And so I quit that job and came home, and it's now been 7 years. I only have 3 more years left in this 10-year commitment. When I first got back 7 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of pride in the city. A lot of people were talking down on it. The first thing that happened, Forbes said we were the most miserable place to live. July, LeBron leaves. The city was on its back, and we were not only letting other people talk about it, we were talking about ourselves. And so a group of us said, let's throw a birthday party for the city of Cleveland. Does anyone throw a birthday? Everybody enjoys their birthday. And we did that. And from there, we were able to start to see that from a social, getting people excited about music festivals and music and the arts in Cleveland, we could also use that energy to translate to do community development project, whether that's rehabbing local high schools, Martin Luther King High School, or whether that is doing something at another school. So we use our social and excitement and to get people excited about cool things in Cleveland to be able to get people excited about coming back to the city and doing positive things. So that's my background, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Mr. Mitchell, we can clap, all right. So Mr. Mitchell hinted on this a little bit. The reason why we're here talking about this is because people have stated that Cleveland has a sort of renaissance over the last couple of years. Where do you guys agree with this, and where have you seen it in your lives, in your work areas of work?
Who wants to take that?
Ms. Crosley, if you want to take it.
Sure. Cleveland definitely is in a renaissance. So when you think about a renaissance, it's a rebirth, it's a new beginning, it's change, right? And all you have to do is look around downtown Cleveland, but also in a lot of the surrounding neighborhoods, and you look at the change that's happening. Yep, there are cranes that are there, there's building that's happening, but that's just the beginning. I mean, that's what you see. It's the whole, Alonzo mentioned this, the whole attitudinal shift as we begin to think about Cleveland as a really exciting city, a city that we're really proud to call home, and we have to be part of driving that forward. So the buildings are there, the bricks and mortars in place, and now we need to really carry the momentum forward with making things happen. It's not just about LeBron or sports teams or the Republican National Convention. It's about making change for the betterment of Cleveland. And what Alonzo's doing in houses and neighborhoods, what Mr. Heinen is doing in terms of putting a grocery store in downtown Cleveland, these are all signs that change is happening.
Right, so my perspective is probably the longest, because I know I'm older than Alonzo, and I'm pretty sure I'm older than Marianne. But so just to give you a perspective, when I went to college, I chose a college that was in the farmlands of Pennsylvania because I was so disgusted by the city here in Cleveland. This was 1973. And when I went to college, you couldn't find a restaurant open after 5 p.m. There was barely a hotel. I mean, the one in Tower City, which is Renaissance, right? Mm-hmm. Renaissance now, that was there, but there wasn't much else. And so, I mean, we had what I would consider a completely dead city. And it was distressing. You know, it was distressing to be 18 years old and have a city that really had no life. Now, keep in mind, we had a relatively thriving business community. We had a lot of offices, a lot of corporations still here. BP was here. A lot of these corporations that have left over time were still very much here, but the city itself just was dead. And so, my perspective, I can't even begin to share how amazing it is to see what's going on right now in downtown. You know, There was no Tremont, no East Fourth, no nothing. All these great places of entertainment and new residences. The residences, the Constantino store was built, I think, somewhere around early 2000s on West 3rd, and so it's a modest grocery store. But there were 6,000 people in downtown at that point. And for a store like ours to be successful, we probably need 18 to 20,000 residents. When we started looking, there was probably 10. By the time we open, there'll be 12. And by the time a year goes by, I would expect to have at least 14,000 residences here. The largest development of residential housing is going on in downtown Cleveland. So, dead, really alive, pretty cool thing. And so the Renaissance, as we're talking about, I think there's lots of things that go into it. Clearly, we're seeing a whole rebirth of what this city was. We were a heavily skewed manufacturing, auto and steel industry back when I went to college. And today we're much more into the service field. Clinic and UH are huge employers. Healthcare is a big deal for us. And but there are all new upstart businesses, because when we toured downtown, the people who were courting us were quick to show us all these new companies that I'd never even heard of. They have 3 floors, 3 floors, 400 people working for them. And so it's really, you guys, all of you who are here in Cleveland, you have no idea how great it is. The city is so great compared to what it was. So we're very thankful, and obviously we made the decision to invest by building the first, in my lifetime, it's almost 60 years. In my lifetime, this will be the first true, real supermarket in downtown Cleveland. There's been other glorified convenience stores, I would call, but this will be a real urban supermarket. So we're real excited about it. Opens February 25th, come see us. Got to put that plug in.
So when I was thinking about I was going to be on this panel, I knew this question, is Cleveland going through a renaissance currently? Because I personally realize I live in 2 Clevelands, though I think people don't realize that there are even 2 Clevelands. But I came to the conclusion that anyone who doesn't think that Cleveland is going through a renaissance right now is probably a hater, right? Because Cleveland is. Downtown it's amazing what's going on downtown. Imagine there was a convention center before that, all we had was public auditorium. And you start to see the bridges and the freeways that are coming in, and there's going to be a whole new public square in a way that was never done before. And I don't know if you've seen the projects that are going in Gateway and things downtown, and even Ohio City and Tremont. No one will tell you this now. I mean, if you go online and try to buy a house in some of these communities, they're now $300,000 in some of these communities. And these are areas where people couldn't give you a home to live there not too long ago. People didn't want to go there. But now, 10, 15 years later, it is the place to go. Detroit Shoreway, all of these areas. So from that perspective, is Cleveland seeing a real renaissance in certain areas within the city? Absolutely. But I think we'd also have to be real, and all of you living all over the city would also know that there are definitely areas within the city that aren't yet experiencing the same renaissance that downtown Cleveland is seeing. You don't have to go too far. You can go east a little bit, and you'll see that for every Ohio City, Tremont, Detroit Shoreway, what is the alternative in the other way? And that goes back to people complaining about that all the time. So I always hear that. I don't know if you've ever thought this yourself, is that if West 25th and Tremont and Ohio City could be awesome like that, then why can't Huff or Glenville or any of these places, right? I mean, have you ever thought that? Well, I think it too, just like everyone else. But and we sit on panels and we talk about it. But that the renaissance that happened in Ohio City and Tremont was much more than just talking. It actually meant that people had to take their resources and decide to be the first person to live over there and move there. And then someone had to move next to them. And then this person had to tell this person. And then it slowly began to grow that way. And I like to see that as a renaissance for Cleveland. I like to see everything that's going right now that's positive. I would like to see it continue. I like to see downtown continue to grow, because once downtown is done, they're going to have to find another place to help, right? So that should ultimately help the neighborhoods as well. So the answer is yes, But I think we still have a long way to go in realizing that the entire city would like to enjoy and experience the renaissance that's happening in a few small areas.
So in order for this upward trend to continue, this renaissance, what would your advice to youth be? Now and maybe in the future, where do you guys see them playing a role? What words of, quote, wisdom would you guys give them?
Well, what I would tell the youth or you guys in this room right now, I know as I looked at the ages in the school, most of you are at least 14 or 15. Well, hopefully at this point you have made it up, or at least, right? You're at least 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, right? Well, with that in that age range right now, if you make the wrong decision out here in this world, they will treat you like an adult. You will be treated like an adult in our justice system because you are at the age in where they believe that you know right from wrong. And so I think sometimes the young people are still just viewing themselves as too young to be able to do whatever it is that you want to do, but that's simply not the case. It's simply not the case. As a matter of fact, if I were young and if I could do it all over again, you guys have an opportunity that none of you even realize. So just as an example, if I go out and start a new business, or Mr. Heinen tries to start a new business right now and it doesn't go well, people would look at us as we're somewhat of an old fool, right? We've lived on this earth long enough not to make mistakes. But you guys are young enough right now to where you could try different things and find out what you like. And if you don't end up falling on your feet right now, you were young, you were learning along the way. So definitely take this as an opportunity to make mistakes, to get involved, to and that's what I would tell the youth to do.
Go for it.
Okay. We're screwing up the order, get all mixed up here. But so I would tell the youth, I think I'll use my daughter as an example. My youngest daughter graduated from college, and she had interned with Deloitte Consulting here in Cleveland. And they desperately, like most firms here, try to get their interns to stay here in Cleveland. And she told them outright, she goes, I may spend the rest of my life in Cleveland, so I'm taking DC, Boston, or Chicago. So she's actually in Chicago. And I think it's not bad to go out and experience other cities. I mean, first of all, I think you learn when you're in other cities. You bring back, it's the same, by the way, it's the reason I told my kids they couldn't come to work for Heinen's, is I wanted them to go experience other businesses and jobs so that they bring something back. And it's the same way where you live, I think. And so, and they are, one's in New York and one's in Chicago. So they're going to bring back what it's like to live in a city. And I would argue both those cities are successful big cities, very big cities. But I also think that, I think Alonzo's really, his comment about I'm going to come back for 10 years and give back to Cleveland, you don't find many people like him. That's not a very common thread that I run across. So, but I think that there are opportunities here in Cleveland, and if giving back to the city where you grew up and making it stronger, I don't think there's any greater satisfaction. I mean, I've lived here all my life, basically, and you get it's a foundation and anchoring that's hard to ever replace. That's why there's more Browns backers clubs across the country than any others, because all these people have moved away over the years. And I used to have this discussion with a guy I traveled with all the time. I'm like, no, these are just Browns fans. He goes, no, Tom, these are people who used to be in Cleveland and they moved away. So of course we started to ask, and 90% of them were Clevelanders that had moved away. And so I think, if you really love the city, you have to give it a chance. And I think the good news for all of you is that we really are in an upswing of creating jobs here and creating opportunities, because you got to go where there's jobs. And so I think the infrastructure and what's going on is generating jobs. And I think it's okay to go away, but I don't think you should ever lose sight of how gratifying it is to come back home.
So I'm just going to piggyback on what they said. Stay in Cleveland. So if you look at the three of us, each one of us moved away, lived away, and then came back. And when we came back, we had the opportunity to do something here and to make a difference. So I have 4 kids, 3 live in large cities, not in Ohio, and they can go to school, they can work, but they can't make a difference in their community because it's just too big. It's not a welcoming environment. I mean, listen to Alonzo's story. I mean, he went away, just made up his mind he was going to come back and make a difference, and then did it. That could be any one of you. His story could be your story. So I think you just have to appreciate Cleveland because it has so many of the amenities of a much larger city, from the sports teams, the museums, the plays, so much that's going on the big scale and a small scale, and that you can come here and you can make a difference. Alonzo's testimony to it, all 3 of us are, that you don't have to have, the connections, you just have to have the desire and the conviction to want to make a difference.
So you've all left Cleveland for various amounts of times in your lives. What do you want your legacy in Cleveland to be, whether it's something that you see in the community, personal achievement? What do you want to be remembered as? Not that you guys are going away anytime soon, hopefully, but what do you want to be remembered as in Cleveland?
All right, we're going to make you go first. You haven't had a chance yet. How's that?
I was ready to take a nap. Well, I think it's, the legacy that I will leave is it's very intertwined with the company that is our family company. And I think my grandfather, when he started the business in 1929, his ambitions are no different than ours, which is, I think he wanted to be the very best, be innovative, but equally, he was very driven to provide for families. So Heinen's continues to provide good paying jobs for people of all different, we hire 25% of our people are students. And so we hire people, provide good jobs. And so I think, to me, the legacy Heinen's will always have is, number one, I think we always want to be well respected and be appreciated for serving high quality food and having great service. But equally, I think the legacy is we're providing a lot of jobs. To your point, we have about 3,000 people here in Cleveland now. So, and we're going to continue to grow. But I think that's a big deal. I think giving people a really good, and we pride ourselves in having people loving working for Heinen's. And that's our number one goal. So that's the first thing we work on, and the last thing we work on a lot of times. So I think that from a legacy perspective, if we can do all that, I'll be just fine with that.
We're going to duke it out. Go ahead.
I'm still writing my story, the history, like my legacy. I'm 33 years old. I'll be 34 this year, and when I hear the word legacy, more so than anything, I think it's what people write about what you did with your life after you have left and done all that you could with your time. So every day I'm doing everything I can with every minute of my time, try to figure out what can I do to make the time that I was here on this planet Earth as beneficial to society as possible. And then hopefully at the end of it, it'll be you guys are ultimately writing the legacy of the people that are supposed to be doing the work that we're doing right now. But I would hope that people would always, whenever someone thinks about me or this is Alonzo, would say that Alonzo always gave 100%. Alonzo always loved Cleveland and put her first. And I went hard. And that's what I do. So that'll be my legacy.
That's great. I guess someone once asked me shortly after I came into my role, they said, okay, what do you want your legacy to be? And I stopped and I thought, it's not really my legacy because I look at myself as just a person who's trying to advance the mission of the Cleveland Leadership Center. So it's not about me, it's about my organization. And it's about having the passion to develop leaders like yourselves, like your parents, like your siblings, like your neighbors, and inspiring them to make a difference for Cleveland. I know it sounds trite or it sounds cliche, but it's really true. I mean, the people who are in this room, you cared enough to come here today to learn about what's going on in Cleveland. You care enough to make a commitment to make a difference in your school community, a difference on your sports team, a difference in your job. Keep doing that. I try every day to write my eulogy. So your eulogy is what they say about you. You know, you're in the church and somebody gets up and says all these wonderful things. What do I want that person to be saying about me? And I would challenge each of you to do that. Every day, think about, how am I going to make a difference? How am I going to care? How am I going to give back? What's going to be different about my world because I was in it today? And if you live your life like that every day, you'll be all set. You won't have to worry about what your legacy is going to be. You'll find your passion, and then you'll just be living that and inspiring others as you go along.
So these things were mentioned earlier, LeBron's return and Cleveland winning the bid for the 2016 Republican National Committee. Where do you see these playing into the so-called Cleveland Renaissance? Do you see them as a cause, as an effect, as a short-time buzzer, as something that will add to the lasting revitalization of Cleveland?
So I would say all of the above. So LeBron coming back is great, right? It brings more people down to Cleveland. When I go to leave my office on game days, I look out and I see like just a sea of taillights as people are trying to get out of the city, to get into the city. The restaurants are all filled. That's really good, right? Yes, it brings money downtown, but better yet, it creates a great buzz. People are paying attention to Cleveland, and people who live here are paying attention to how successful we are. So the Republican National Convention, so everybody was so psyched. Yes, we beat out Dallas, we beat out all these other cities. We're going to have 50,000 people here next summer for that convention. I mean, stop and think about it. Think about how big your neighborhood is, how big your school is. 50,000 people descending upon Cleveland, and they're spending money. 15,000 of those folks are going to be media folks. So the whole world is going to know about what's happening in Cleveland. The Republican National Convention is the second most covered event after the Olympics. I mean, that's incredible. And it's going to be all about Cleveland. So I think they're great things, but they're just the start of what's going to go forward. And that's where all of you got to carry that momentum forward. You know, Tom and I, and yes, you are just a little bit older than me for the record. Tom and I,
Thanks, appreciate that.
No problem. So Tom and I are going to, we're going to pass the baton to all of you. So it's up to you to keep, and Alonzo, and it's up to all of you to keep Cleveland moving forward.
So the LeBron question has been answered for us before, whether or not we realize that it has been answered for us before, right? So we've had LeBron before, and he was here, and it was packed, and we were going to the finals, and we were excited, and it was great, right? The city was abuzz, we were excited, and then LeBron left, and then what happened? We quit going to the game. I mean, it totally changes. And so I think one thing we could learn from that experience that we had the last time is to take more advantage of him not more advantage of him while he is here, but to find a way to work with him more while he is in the midst of playing, but also to begin to build programs and things with him in the city of Cleveland, because I think he does an awesome job with Akron and the things. You see it all over TV and everything. I think that's phenomenal. To see just a few of those things potentially happening in Cleveland as well would help to build a lineage or some legacy for what he's doing here. And the RNC, I go back and forth on it. We're spending, it's going to cost about $100 million or so, or it's big numbers for this type of a convention, and it's a convention that will last about 5 days or so, or a week or so. And so for this time, we're going to get a huge boost of media exposure and people coming in and us getting some good footage of what's going on in the city. But also, I think the opportunity that we can get from the RNC going forward, the energy that we should try to look for, is that we need to start to plan for the convention that's in 2017. If the RNC is the biggest media piece other than the Olympics, then that means we should be able to go after any convention at this point, right? Maybe even the Olympics. Or why can't we go after or as cold as it been in the Winter Olympics, right? But I mean, any of these other larger conventions and conferences, because now it's on our resume that we've proven that we're able to pull off this type of a thing. So now, what are the other? This is the number one thing. What are the other 15? And then I think we need to put a task force to go and start to go after all of those. We need to make sure that the convention center space is filled. So that would be.
Well, so I would certainly agree with both of you, and Mike, there are contemporaries of mine out there when I visit them who particularly are in my industry, and they're like, well, Cleveland, isn't that where the river caught on fire? And I'm so tired of listening to that. I mean, that was a long, long time ago. But I think the rebirth of Cleveland through LeBron and the RNC will finally get Cleveland on the map, or help get Cleveland on the map for something other than the river that caught on fire. And so I think it's kind of one of those things. Anytime we can put a favorable light on the city, it helps, and it's just good PR, and it helps in lots of ways. It's going to engage people to want to come here. Clearly, the comment about inviting other business conventions here, the big major cities have a huge amount of revenue due to conventions. I go to some of these conventions. I'm like, oh, why can't we have this in Cleveland? And now that we've got a new convention hall and all this infrastructure we've built on, we have prepared and situated Cleveland to start to grow in these areas. And so I'm excited about that. I think that will happen. But at the end of the day, how we do our business and how we go about living our lives day in and day out will determine what happens to Cleveland. Those things are nice shots in the arm, but they're never going to carry the day. As you said, the day after they're gone, what happens? And so it's a great way to put us in the limelight nationally, in a very favorable light, inevitably. There's a lot of people that are going to discover Cleveland, and they'll spread the word. But at the end of the day, we still need people day to day to go out and be working to bring people to Cleveland, to live, to do conventions, to work.
So this is sort of a fun yet challenging one to end our moderated portion of today's event on. What is one word or phrase that you would use to describe Cleveland in the here and the now, the present?
So my word would be accelerating.
I would use two, and it's family friendly.
I would say potential, and I would say resilient.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. This is going to conclude our moderated portion, so I'm going to kick it over to Josh for the mid-forum announcements.
Today we are enjoying a youth panel discussion on the revitalization of Cleveland. Today featuring Tom Heinen, Marianne Crosley, and Alonzo Mitchell. Our moderator is Youth Forum Council President Nick Rutherford, a senior at Welsh Jesuit High School. We encourage you to formulate questions for our panelists and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. The City Club Youth Forum series is sponsored by a generous gift from AT&T. We thank you for your support. We welcome students from many schools to today's forum. A full list can be seen in your printed program. For more information on our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online at thecityclub.org. Now we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome you and anyone and everyone. Holding the microphones today will be Grant and Autumn. First question, please.
We have a question on the right side of the room.
My name is Philip Hidiati. I'm a member of the City Club Youth Forum Council, and I also go to Hawkins School in Gates Mills. My question is basically, I've tried to invite as many people as possible to come visit our city from other areas around the country. I've asked them to come and experience Cleveland. My question really is, what do you think we can do to try to encourage youth from across the nation and younger people from across the nation to consider coming to Cleveland and experiencing Cleveland so that they can, if they enjoy it, maybe they can stay here?
I'll start with that if that's okay. Thank you for doing that, for all of your outreach, and great question. So when you go to college, the summers in between each of your college years, you want to get a great internship. So what you want to do wherever your college campus is, whether it's Cleveland State or Baldwin Wallace, or you're all the way on the West Coast or East Coast or South, encourage your friends, your roommates to come and seek internships in Cleveland. Getting them to Cleveland, getting them to see everything that's happening in the city is the best way to sell them on the city. So I've been involved with a whole host of internship programs, and we have people who came here because it's the only internship they could get. They're not happy about being here. They spend 6, 8, 10 weeks in Cleveland in the summer and take advantage of all it has to offer, and their perception is changed, and then they accept permanent jobs here. So that's the way to get them here. But be great ambassadors for your hometown.
Well, the best analogy is if you tell kids to meet you at the library to go and read, how many kids are going to show up necessarily for that? But if you tell them that there's going to be some type of something exciting that's happening, then people will come. And I think that you have some assets to be able to entice young people to come into the area, and then you have to find a way to funnel them to Cleveland. Like, for instance, Cedar Point. I mean, so many people go to Cedar Point from all over the country because it is one of the greatest amusement parks in the world, right? Well, how many people just go to Sandusky, do that, and then buzz on back to wherever they're going? You know, maybe there's a way to make it so that people don't just come for one day or just for that they can find a way to also come to Cleveland. So I think it's going to be a selling of coming for just more than one thing, that there's a number of things that people can come and experience together. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I'd build on both of those comments. I think a lot of you are going to college in the near future, and I do think if you're going out of Cleveland to college, inviting those people back to experience Cleveland is the best way. And everybody reads passion, and so if they see your passion for the city, it will transfer. They'll get it. They'll seek to understand why you're so passionate about why you live. And I mean, as corny as it sounds to me, we spread the word Cleveland one person at a time. And yeah, the RNC will be great to have 50,000 people here, and hopefully those people go tell 50,000 and they tell 50,000. And suddenly Cleveland's specter rises as a place to not only live, work, do everything, right? And so I think you inviting your friends back and letting them truly experience all that Cleveland has to offer, and it has a lot to offer these days. So I think that's a great way to build.
We have a question on the left side of the room.
Sorry. My name is Jawan Shabazz, and I'm a senior at Gilmore Academy. So you guys talked a lot about this renaissance and how it's bringing about different changes and infrastructure and new opportunities, but I'm more so interested in what Cleveland will look like at the end of this renaissance. So are we just going to be seeing, and essentially I'm just asking, are we just going to be seeing new buildings, or are we going to be seeing something a little bit more, such as a shift in Clevelanders' mentality towards the city, or just something a little more than just new infrastructure?
Okay, so I would suggest that success breeds success. And so I think what you'll see is that I would like to think that we never get out of our status of renaissance. I would like to think that we're constantly improving and constantly innovating and changing. And so I think what that means is, as far as what people think of Cleveland, I think that just enhances always what people think of Cleveland. I think people like to be in cities where there's energy and improvement, and they see things changing and things that enhance their quality of life. And that's clearly going on here, but I don't know why it would ever stop. And Alonzo made a great point before when he talked about, well, not all neighborhoods are experiencing the Renaissance. And when you say, well, how do you do that? Well, I don't think there's an easy way to do that, but typically the way that happens is that Renaissance just grows and expands. And that's how that happens.
I think your question is great. It's a question that I pose to leadership all the time, in that Renaissance typically means that this is what you imagine to be almost the best that the city could be in right now, really, right? That means that, and that this is what people consider this to be the best for, where does that kind of end, and where does that I'm totally with you. I think at the end of the Renaissance, and let me backtrack a little bit to this point, are you ever out of a Renaissance? So when I traveled, I did a sabbatical where I took 18 days off the grid, where I pretty much turned my cell phone off and I just kind of backpack around and things, right? And every city I went to, every sign said they were going through a Renaissance. I went to Charlotte. Charlotte had a sign up. This year we have built more buildings and hospitals and hotels than we ever have. Charlotte Renaissance. Then I stopped down in Austin. I see a sign that said Austin is going through a Renaissance. There's 150 people who move here every single day to Austin. This is the best. Then I stopped, everywhere I go, all these cities are saying and thinking in this same way. So, so I say all that to say that at the end of this period of this time in Cleveland, I like to say that downtown ended up doing awesome and these other communities ended up doing awesome, but also that there were communities that originally weren't doing that great, but they began to see some of the progress and the positivity that everybody else is sharing in. That would be the definition of a real Cleveland Renaissance.
And I would just say, if you want the Renaissance to continue, you have to own it. It's one thing to complain, but let your voice be heard. If there's something you want to see different, speak up. Email somebody and say, I'm part of the City Club Youth Forum. People get back to you. Remember how I said that Cleveland is a city that welcomes, particularly ideas from your generation, unlike the big cities my kids are in? So speak up. And if somebody doesn't get back to you, reach out to somebody else. Don't give up. Let your voice be heard.
And just to piggyback on that a little bit, speaking on that, 15 years ago, the city of Cleveland didn't have anything for New Year's Eve. Nothing was happening. In Akron, they do something. In Chicago, New York, you turn on the TV, there's something happening everywhere. Cleveland wasn't doing anything. And so we complained about it. And we kept saying, Cleveland should be doing something for New Year's Eve. And then finally it was like, so do it then. And then that just, if you feel like it should be happening and it's not happening, rather than complaining, you have to go in and put the work in to see that it comes to pass. And I think that's exactly what.
So do you all know about the massive New Year's Eve party that Alonzo organized? How many people did you get this year on the mall?
We did over 10,000 people this year.
Yeah, nobody gave him permission to do that. He didn't ask for permission, he just did it.
Oh, I had to get permission.
Well, I know, but you were going to go do it.
Yeah.
We have a question in the right corner of the room.
Testing. Okay. My name is Dwayne Hurt, and you kind of touched upon what I was going to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. So first of all, I commend you for speaking to the notion of two Clevelands. That's very important to me. But how can these young achievers begin that walk toward, challenging policy or even effectively changing policy so that we can see that renaissance maybe move uptown and move more east? You started to talk about get involved in emails and things like that, but if you can speak to something specific that they can do as far as becoming that change mechanism, that channel.
All right, I'll give a couple, and I know you probably got a lot to add there, Alonzo. So how many of you in this room are 18? How many of you who are 18 are registered to vote? Register to vote. And I mean, you say, my vote doesn't matter. Your vote does matter. And you've got to start now letting your voice be heard. So as soon as you turn 18, you get that voter registration in, because then you're going to force yourself to be aware about the candidates, to be aware about the issues, and you're going to be informed about what's going on in your community. And when I said about sending emails, I mean it. If there's a leader or someone who's doing something, any of the three of us, and you want a connection, send an email. And people will respond to you. But you are really important to the future of the city. You are the future of this city. People will respond.
So the thing that I do, at least I can only give you my own personal experience. So I wanted to when I see how the city is kind of run, you don't really know, right? If you haven't been to a council meeting, if you've never been to your city hall, or then you just are watching the news and the media and kind of trying to figure out, so like, how are things voted on? How are they passed? How do these decisions get made as a whole? Like, I'm a very inquisitive person. Like, I want to know how and why. And so the easiest thing that I just did was I found out the city council meetings are every Monday at 7 p.m. at City Hall. Now, I don't know if you even know where the Cleveland City Hall is, but it's on East 6th and Lakeside. But it's every Monday. And I didn't really know what was going on, so I said I'll go the first Monday, and I went and I sat and I watched and I took notes. And for the last over a year now, I go every single Monday. I don't miss a single one. And I'm there trying to watch, and I'm there learning, and I'm hearing what's happening. And if I have a question, you can walk up to a council person and shake his hand and say, what is this all about, and things of that nature. So if you care, you have to actually go. You know, I tell people all the time, you know, send emails, and sometimes, you know, people will respond to it. But if you send an email and then the next day they have to look you in your face and they see you, and then that first time they saw me at city council meeting, they kind of was like, oh, yeah, you know. And then 2 months later, I was still there. And then 6 months later, I'm still sitting in that same seat. And then now 1 year later. So you have to be consistent. You have to make yourself present. And you're going to have to just, you know, keep going, you know, that way. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you two did a great job of answering it. The only thing I would add is that, said a different way probably, is if you're passionate about anything, you have to take ownership and you have to find ways to impact. And I see it every day in my life. Ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things. And it's just because they want to make a difference and they want to do something different. Every one of you can make a difference in whatever you choose to make a difference in. And, you know, Alonzo is the epitome here of being patient. You know, I'm not going to city council meetings every Monday. So God bless him.
We have a question here to the left side of the room.
I'm Maria Luke, and I'm a senior at Shaw High School, and I want to know how is this going to be sustainable and not just a trend?
Could you ask it one more time? Is the Renaissance going to be a sustainable or a trend?
Yeah.
Well, as you go back through the history of the city of Cleveland, the city of Cleveland has gone through these Renaissance periods, and I know Mr. Heinen could tell a little bit more about that. But like, you know, there was a time when the flats was an even bigger deal than what they're trying to bring right now. The flats, like for our parents and you know, when people came into town, first thing they'd want to go or they'd hear about is the flats for whatever the reason is. And it went through that whole Renaissance period where that was a huge thing. And then, you know, the building of Gateway, when Jacobs Field and Progressive Field and the Q were built. That entire area began to see a bit of a boom. And so I also think that just from a city standpoint, cities go through ebbs and flows where things are going to be better and things aren't going to be as good. But I think as a city, we like to see ourselves be as consistent as possible so that we don't have such low lows, right? That we can be consistently always going upward. That's what I would say.
This is mainly for Mr. Heinen. It's strange to say Heinen and not Heinens, but anyway.
Many people do, don't worry.
That's okay. So I'm a Beechwood shopper, and we have that corner in your store for the Jewish community. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that you're going downtown. Mrs. Obama, for the last 6 years, has been trying to take care of desert areas for shopping centers. I'm also grew up in Youngstown. They had a place called Bottom Dollar. It was very successful, and it was in the desert areas. Is there any possible, like I heard you say you have to have 14 to 18,000 people to make your store successful. Is it possible to have a takeoff of your store in the areas that need you, because the vegetables and the healthy foods and all of those types of things are difficult for people, and they end up at the convenience store like you talk about, and it's just not okay. Is there any way, I know it's not as profitable, but she's had 6 years of trying to do this, and it's very difficult for her to succeed, and she's the wife of the president. So I know that this is a big deal for you, but those are where people really need the help.
Yeah, food deserts are a problem across the country, and
do you know why Bottom Dollar went out when Aldi's bought them, and they were successful? Do you know why they got bought out?
I do not. But I mean, normally companies that are bought out means that they're not financially returning.
No, they told, because Youngstown, just like you're revitalizing here, they went to them and they not only Aldi said, are we closing you down, we're not taking any of the employees. And I just want to know.
So Aldi, you're saying Aldi said they weren't taking any of the employees?
Didn't take any of the employees.
But they opened up as Aldi's, right?
They stayed Aldi's, but the desert stores in the poor areas just closed.
Well, I mean, from a pure business perspective, keep in mind that grocery stores forever, their return is 1%. So we make 1 penny on every dollar spent. And that's true, and many stores make less than that. So everything's driven by volume. And so the model, the traditional grocery store is a very sensitive business model. You know, the selling the grocery, dairy, frozen supports a lot of the perishable items that we sell. And candidly, the amount of shrink in produce, meats, prepared foods, all the things we do is fairly high. So I don't believe anybody's found the magic bullet of how you do a food desert, mostly in fresh foods, and make it work. So we don't have a good answer for that. The other thing is that we would never exclude anything, but you got to pick the right market for the business you're in, and I think that for what it's worth, Cleveland was a food desert, right? And the real reason that one of the big reasons we're here is because the Geist brothers found a way to economically support the inclusion of Heinen's into their hotel and their 1010 and all that they do. The way you typically get a grocery store into an area like that is a developer packages it so they're minimizing the risk. For years, the standard conversation I had with everybody is like, you got to move downtown. I said, we need more people. We need a grocery store to have more people. I'm like, well, there you are. I'm like, we're not a big enough company. We were never a big enough company, and we aren't now, to build a store and say, oh, they'll come in 10 years. We can't do that. Now, somebody like Kroger, and who's just this huge #1 company, they don't even do it, but they could. So it's a quandary. There's no question. But I think one of the ways getting people in food deserts is if you can find a developer who will package things and lower the risk in the investment for the supermarket.
We have a question over here to the right.
Hello, my name is Eric Stewart, and I am a senior at Whitney Young. I had a question about the Republican National Convention that Ms. Crosley mentioned. I was wondering, what made them want to bring that to Cleveland? Did they notice, the growth we were having, or did they want to help the growth and try to improve it, or was it just, something else that influenced that? And in addition to that, how can we build off of that publicity, such as make sure it's not a come-and-go thing? And, yeah.
Yes, they most definitely noticed the growth. This was not the first time they had visited Cleveland. They had visited Cleveland in earlier years, looking at us as a convention site then, and dismissed us. Obviously, we didn't get it in earlier years. And then when they came back this time, they said, this is a different city. They said, everything about it's different. It feels different. When we got off the airplane, Mayor Jackson was there to greet them when they got off the airplane. And he stayed with them during their whole site visit and all the way until they got back on that plane. So, and community leadership was there. So what they saw was not just buildings going up and not just cool things happening in Tremont or Ohio City or anything else. They saw the capacity to host a convention, but more important, they saw the desire, the tremendous desire for this community to have a convention. And that's what persuaded them. Young people were there at the airport greeting them, so they felt it. So, and when you want to talk about the momentum, I'll go back to what I said, you guys have to own it. I mean, you're going to be the ones who need to carry this momentum forward. We're just hopefully paving the way so that you can do it. So go to college or get some sort of education beyond high school so that you can be earning a good living and making a difference in your neighborhood.
I have a question towards the middle of the room.
My name is Taylor. I'm from Max Hayes High School. And my question's for Alonzo. I was interested in something that you said pertaining to the east side of Cleveland. And I was engrossed to know like what were your visions for that area's improvement.
So, is that the whole question? Okay. So the biggest project that I'm working on is called the Village Project. And so if you're familiar with Rockefeller Park, the cultural garden, so if you get off on MLK, it's the winding street with each culture has like a fountain or a sculpture. You know what I'm talking about, most of you, right? Well, when you drive that winding road and you look up the hill, you'll see these beautiful homes that were built a very, very long time ago. And so what we did was we found 6 city blocks that has about 40 houses on those 6 city blocks, with about 20 of them being vacant, which means they're either boarded up or they're not inhabited. So we pretty much said, you know, if the 4 of us are friends, are good friends, that if I buy one house and you buy one house and you buy one house and you buy one house, now we have the whole street. And so that's ultimately what we've been trying to do, is that instead of trying to fix one house up at a time, that we found a concentrated area of 5 or 6 blocks right in Glenville, right over the cultural gardens. It's about a mile from the lake. It's right by the art museum and the University Circle and all of those things. It's in a like if someone were just in an airplane looking over Cleveland and they didn't know that, you know, where everyone lived, this is where people would pick because of its proximity to everything else. And so that's what we're doing. We have been purchasing homes. We're going to rehab them and all move into the area collectively, because like Mr. Heinen said, this area that we're moving in, it does not have a supermarket. It's a food desert. And does everyone know what a food desert is? Do you know what that means? So that means like in a neighborhood where 85 to 90% of the people who live there don't have cars. So they all take the bus or public transportation. And so in order to get some food or they're from a grocery store, they have to go and do that. So they eat what is around them, and we know what is in some of these communities for you to eat on a daily basis. And so, but for us to entice, Heinens to say, I would like for you to come to this desert, I need to show him that these people have just now moved in and there's some energy. So then the supermarket will make more people want to live there, but more people living there will make a supermarket potentially want to come there. So that's pretty much what I'm working on the east side.
We have a question in the left corner of the room. Oh, maybe we don't. We have a question in the middle of the room.
My name's Conrad Geis, and I go to Gilmore Academy. I had a question for Mr. Heinen. Are you planning on like expanding your company into like bigger cities like Chicago or New York and like expand
Well, actually, you must have been sleeping lately, because we have 4 stores in Chicago. And we opened up our first one in 2012, and I didn't mean to be critical, by the way. We just opened up 3 stores on the North Shore last year, and so and candidly, one of the reasons we did that is that we felt the growth here in the markets we trade in were fairly limited. And that we felt it was important for 2 reasons. One, buying power. We self-distribute, so for what that's worth, we're probably the only company our size that has 2 warehouses, a manufacturing plant, and we do all this ourselves. So in order to continue to be attractive to the big companies to sell us truckloads of stuff, we have to continue to grow. So that's one. But the real primary reason is that we're a company built entirely, as I said earlier, on people loving working there. And one of the components of that is you have to give people an opportunity to grow professionally. And if you got to wait for somebody to retire or die to assume positions of responsibility, that's a problem for us. And so now we grew quicker in Chicago because a 95-year-old company vacated 72 stores a year ago, December, and opened up some opportunities. And so we had our largest growth period in the history of the company. We will have built 5 stores in roughly 15 months. And keep in mind, we have 19 right now, and we're 86 years old. So to say that this wasn't a bit of a challenge would be an understatement. But it's been fun. It's been fun. So yes, but we would always, at this point, we would always look for cities within an 8-hour driving radius, so we could use our support facilities.
So thank you very much to all 3 of you. That is going to conclude our question and answer portion of today's forum.
Today at the City Club, we have been enjoying a youth forum panel discussion of 3 completely different aspects of leadership in Cleveland. Tom Heinen, Marianne Crosley, and Alonzo Mitchell, thank you. And thank you all for coming today. This forum is now adjourned.